My name is David Nunez. I'm the president of the Total Rewards Association of South Florida, and I'm happy to see I have in front of my screen a couple board members here, Bahaudin, Mujtaba, and Bahaudin heads up our professional development and world of work liaison. And then I have Mary Muniz-Pellicer, and Mary is a dear friend, and Mary is the heads up our VP of Membership and Engagement. And so I don't know if anybody else is on. Let me see my screen. Anybody else I can see at this point in time? I know we have a few more joining us. It's still a little bit early, but I wanted to go ahead and just give a few announcements so we can start our program. If you feel free to, have a bite at work if you have to eat. And, I'm sure towards the end we'll have time for Q&A. But basically, just a couple housekeeping announcements. I'd like to thank our sponsors, and that is NFP and Colonial Life. They have been our sponsors for our conference, our platinum sponsors. And through that, they sponsor the webinars as well with additional webinar sponsors from time to time. Just for housekeeping purposes, we're having an upcoming webinar, the details of which we're going to be sending out probably at the first part of next week on June 14th. So if you can just keep your calendars open for that lunchtime there, if you're available, we'd love to have you join us there. There's also upcoming, the board is planning a networking event. And I know from now that we're coming out of COVID, many of us are anxious to be able to get back into person-to-person networking. So that's coming up soon, and we'll give you more information through the letter. Well, let me just start by saying to Dr. Song, Dr. Xiaochuan Song, thank you so much for being our guest presenter this afternoon. We're glad to have you. You have a very interesting title, Justice for Gig Workers, the Challenges of Opportunities for Fair Compensation. And let me just share with the team that's here today, our group, that presentation will focus on advocating for fair compensation for gig workers. And as you all know, gig workers make up a good percentage today of our economy. By shedding light on the struggles and obstacles encountered by gig workers, Dr. Song seeks to raise awareness of the need for justice and equitable treatment in this rapidly evolving and innovative industry. Now, Dr. Song, I haven't heard that word justice used a lot in HR talks, and I'm very pleased to see that, because we live in a world that many people don't get treated fairly, and gig workers, I suspect, make a part of that group. A little bit of a background on Dr. Song. He's an assistant professor of management and is currently working, as you can see, from Texas A&M, where he teaches courses including HR management, employee compensation, principles of management, and HR analytics. He has a PhD in management from the Culverhouse College of Business at the University of Alabama, and he's established himself as a researcher in the fields of organizational justice, gender diversity, employee well-being, and managing technology-enhanced working environments. Prior to his academic career, Dr. Song gained valuable experience in healthcare management, where he honed his skills in hiring physicians, nurse practitioners, physician credentialing with healthcare insurance carriers, medical billing, and HIPAA compliance training. Dr. Song, it's a pleasure to have you. Thank you for taking your time, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say. It's all yours, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so glad to be here today. And again, thank you. I want to say special thanks to David for such a detailed introduction about me, about my background. Yes, just like David mentioned before, gig workers and the gig economy these days is getting more attention and is on the rise, especially if we look back what happened in the past 3 years because of the pandemic, because of the technology, just like we're using the Zoom technology right now. More and more people, not just in the US, but also around the world, start joining the gig economy and the gig work. So this actually raises a critical concern for both the managers, HR professionals, as well as reward compensation professionals, because what kind of practice we can promote to build to make sure all these gig workers, they are fairly treated when it comes to their remuneration, their compensation. And just like we talked about our today's session, we're going to focus on the justice. So justice, generally speaking, this is about how people feel they are treated fairly in terms of what they contribute to their work and what they receive from their contribution from their work. So in today's presentation, I will share a little bit more information and as well as the challenges related to the gig. So first of all, I want to say thank you for I'm so glad to be here today at the Total Reward Association of South Florida, TRASF, to share a little bit more about the gig workers as well as the challenges, opportunities for their fair compensation. My name is Xiaochuan Song. I am currently the assistant professor of management at the Texas A&M University at Kingsville, and it is my pleasure, and I'm so excited to be here today to share a little bit more about this topic. So my plan is that we're gonna have about 45 minutes to present these 5 sections, and after that, we're going to move to the Q&A section, and I'm happy to answer all the questions you have about the gig worker, gig economy, as well as gig workers' compensation challenges. So these are the topics, the sections we're going to talk about. So I'm going to start from a quick overview about the gig workers and the gig economy. After that, I'm going to talk about the gig workers' professional profile. And after that, the challenges to the gig workers' compensation from the justice perspective, and then share a little bit about my research agenda in gig workers' compensation, and finally about the future opportunities to address the compensation issues for the gig workers. So that's our the plan of our today's presentation. So now let's move to the first section. So first of all, before we move to the presentation, I would like to ask everyone a question. When it comes to the gig workers, can anybody share with me any examples about who are the gig workers? Any examples? And everybody is welcome to share any examples about the gig workers.
I think the first one that comes to my mind is as Bahaudin said, the Uber drivers, the rideshare drivers are the gig workers. And then I think of people in the advertising world that do special projects. Those that do writing, at times we consider gig workers, independent writing for jobs. So those are the ones that come to my mind first.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's very good examples. Any other examples when we think about the gig workers, or maybe think about our daily life? I guess many of us, we have the experience of getting the maybe services or the certain kind of services from the gig workers. Let me see if I have any posts right here. Influencers, Uber drivers. Yes, these are also the very good examples about the Uber driver. I'm sorry, about the gig workers. And some other examples I can think about, such as if you conduct research or maybe marketing studies and analysis over the internet. You might have heard about a platform. It's called Amazon Mechanical Turk. So many people, many individuals, they sign up and try to get the task there and finish the task and get to the compensation. Those are also the examples of the gig workers. So basically, when we think about the gig workers, these days, we can see quite a few examples, just like some of them we talked about, the Uber, Lyft drivers, the DoorDash drivers who deliver the food for the customers. We also have the Instacart. For example, if you try to buy something, but you don't want to go for the shopping, you can place the order, tell the Instacart what kind of what kind of grocery you want to get, and someone at their platform will help you to buy what you need and deliver to your home location. And we also have individuals, professionals who can provide professional services either over the internet or offline. For example, say if I write a paper or maybe certain kind of writing, but I'm not quite sure if there could be any kind of issue or grammatical issues, anything like that, I can try to find out a person to do the proofreading, so which is a service delivered online, Or maybe I find that I wanted to hire someone to mow the grass for my front yard, the backyard. So that's the services I order online, but the service is going to be delivered offline. And also we have the traditional, what we call the freelancing works. So these are the different examples of the gig workers. So basically, if we look at all these different examples we just talked about, we can generally boil down to two essential components or the features from the gig works. So one is these kind of works we call the gig works. Those are the temporary, the short-term project-based works. Say if I have something to be finished, I post it online, I find people to do that. That's a temporary work. That's a short-term. That is a project. And this is also a on-demand basis. That means once I try to hire someone, I don't hire that person permanently. I just want to hire that person to help me to finish this project. And after that, I make the payment and the person will walk away to find another job. So maybe in the future, I need this service again, I will hire that person again. But that's on the what we call the on-demand basis. So these two components, those are the essential building blocks of these days nowadays gig work. And here we also wanted to keep in mind that throughout this presentation, our main focus is on those people, the gig workers, who do the gig work for a living. We're not talking about people who do the gig work for fun. Apparently, there are platforms, for example, Top Coders, Kaggle, the platform that people sign up and they join the competition. They work as a team. They win the competition and get the award or something, or maybe a recognition. So those people, they sign up on these platforms for fun or just for getting a sense of achievement. But here, that's not our focus today. What we focus today is people who sign up, work as the gig worker for a living, to make the money to bring home the bacon. That's our main focus today. So this is something I wanted to point out before we move to the next section. So the next section, we're going to take a look at how gig work, the system, how it works. So back to about 10, 15 years ago, when the gig work or the gig platform first introduced to the general public, we usually see some companies when they have certain kind of project or tasks need completed, instead of going with a platform such as we talked about, like the Uber Eats or maybe DoorDash or Amazon Mechanical Turk. So those companies, they just simply post their jobs on their website and try to find out people who are interested in take that. And those companies, why they do that? Because they feel that's not quite necessary to hire someone permanently to do this kind of work, because this is a one-time work. This is a one-time project. When they have that finished, they probably in the foreseeable future will not need that person to do the work again. So in that context, those companies, they try to post the task on their company's website to recruit the gig workers. And usually those companies, we call them the requesting organizations or the requester. And on another side of the aisle, we have the gig workers. So these two parties, they get connected through the company website, and each party, they will have the instant message or the email or maybe the phone call to share with each other about their information, about the qualification, about the task, about the project. If they reach an agreement, the gig workers, they start working. And once they get everything completed, they get the compensation. This is a very straightforward process. And then, especially in the past 10 years, we have seen all these different types of the gig work platforms make the system to be a little bit more complicated and also more organized. That is the platform. So the platform basically is a place. It is like an open square that every individual, either a company, organization, or a person, professional individual, can go to that platform to sign up. So when they sign up as either a requester or a worker. So once they finish the sign up, the workers can browse all these posted tasks and find out those tasks they're interested in. And if they find, well, seems like something that they have the capability, they have the task, the knowledge, skills, the ability to do the work, then they're gonna send the message to those requesters who post the job, the task, and then they communicate, they determine, make the agreement about the pay rate, about how long is this temporary hiring or employment, and then they start working and submit the finished work, either online or offline. And then when the requester gets the completed work, they check the quality. If everything looks fine, they're going to release the payment. But here, please note that I put a $2 symbol here. One is the payment to the gig workers, and another one is to the platform. This is because those platforms, usually they're going to also charge a commission fee for the payment that requesters pay the gig workers. For example, let's say requester wants to pay $100 to a gig worker for 3 days work. Then this payment, before made to the gig workers, this requester will need to deposit the money onto the platform's what they call the escrow account. So this escrow account, once the requester finds out the job is completed with high quality, they're going to notify the platform, hey, now is the time you can release the payment. So the platform will keep, in most of the cases, 5% to 20% of the payment and give the rest of the payment, $95 to $80 to the gig workers. And depending on different platforms, they might charge different commission fee. And these days, some platforms, they just say, oh, we try to revolutionize this pay or business model. We will never charge any commission fee, something like that. However, they're going to charge the requesters and the gig workers a monthly subscription fee. So in that way, the requesters, they're going to pay certain few dollars, $20 or $30 per month, so that they can get more posting, or they can choose to be a free account. That way, they will receive relatively fewer number of the available gig workers profile online. And same thing for the gig workers. So these days, more and more platforms try to use the monthly payment, they ask those workers and the requesters to subscribe and pay the monthly fee. So this is different ways that platforms can make money and keep their operation. So this is how these different type of the platform, how they work these days. And if we look at the gig economy around the nation, we can find that before the pandemic, approximately 36% of the US workers, that's about 62 million people, were part of the gig economy. And as of the February this year, this number has reached to over 73 million people. So this is basically an indication that more and more people in the US start joining the gig economy and the gig worker. And there are multiple reasons behind that. Some researchers suggest that one of the major reasons is the pandemic. As we know, during the pandemic, lots of the industries, especially, for example, the service industry, restaurant industry, as well as hospitality, airline companies, they had no choice because the demand declined. They have no choice but lay off many of their employees. So for those employees who were laid off, they have to find a way to make money to support the family. So many of them, they decided to join the gig economy, the gig work, to make money to support the family. And the new technologies such as Zoom or other working platform also make that possible for people to join the gig work easier than before. And some other researchers, for example, the Pew Research Center, also based on their recent study, they indicated that people decided to join the gig economy or the gig work because one of the top, those are the on the right side, those top 6 reasons. Some of them, they wanted to make extra money. Some of them, they wanted to cover the gap when it comes to the changes of the income. For example, if they got a gap, they laid off last month and their new job going to start 2 months later. So they're going to need to work on something to make some money for the gap. And some of those people who decide to work as gig workers, they try to have more control about their schedule, because if you work as the gig worker, you have relatively more flexible schedule. You don't need to get to the office from 8 to 4. You don't need to work, say, if you have some time, you want to work over during the weekend, you have this free choice. You can decide what time you want to work. Just like some of these platforms, when they put their advertisement, like Uber and Amazon Mechanical Turk, they put their advertisement say that you can make the money anytime you want. You can make the money, for example, during the weekend, during the holiday, or even the time when you wait for your air flight. You can work on something to make extra cash for that time. So you have very high level of flexibility if you join the part of the gig economy. And also some people, they wanted to be their own boss. They wanted to have higher level of the control of their career, their life. And also people try to do that for fun. That's just like we talked before about the people who sign up on the top coder, kaggle.com. Those people, they try to find out the challenging tasks to prove they have certain kind of competency. They wanted to get the sense of achievement. And finally, some people join the gig economy because it's going to be hard for them to find a job, for example, the office-based work. So they have no choice but joining the gig economy to make money, to support the family. So these are the different factors, different reasons behind people's motivation when they decide to join the gig economy and work as the gig worker. Now let's move to the next section about the gig worker's professional profile. So for the gig worker's professional profile, it has been a debate, not just in the US, but also around the world about their profile, which is the debate about whether they should be classified as the independent contractors or the employees. In other words, you might see, if you Google search this term, you might find also some other debate. They might have different name. They call that, should the Uber drivers be classified as 1099 workers or the W-2 worker? So that's the same idea. In the US, currently, the majority of the court and the government agencies have classified the gig workers as independent contractors rather than the employees. And if we look at, let's say, for example, from the standard at the Internal Revenue Services, the IRS, they use this, what they call the three common law rules to determine if a job, a person, a professional should be defined or classified as an employee or independent contractor based on three standards here. And this is also the rule that widely used by many states as well as many organizations. So let's take a quick look at these three standards. So the first standard is about the behavioral control. So this standard basically say that whether or not the hiring organization or the requester, they give instructions, guidelines, and training to those people. The second standard is about the financial control. So this standard refers to that whether or not the company invest to the workers those job-related materials, asking workers to work exclusively for that organization and pay those workers periodically. And the third rule is the relationship of the parties. In other words, whether or not there is a formal written contract, permanent job position available to the workers. So if we think about these three rules we just talked about, we can find that for the Uber driver, let's say the Uber Lyft drivers, it's going to be a little bit difficult to classify them as the employees. So let's take a look at each of them. So for the behavioral control, let's think about the Uber drivers. Does Uber give them the instructions, guidelines, and training? So for the instruction and the guidelines, so they do get some instructions. For example, the Uber drivers, they're going to need to download the app, the driver's app. And also they're going to get the guideline from the Uber about how they clean their car, what kind of, for example, music, if they decide to play the music the loudness cannot get to certain decibel level. And they also have the guideline, the suggestion that you might want to prepare some bottle of water into the for the back seat, something like that, like the instructions, either to be mandatory or maybe recommended. And in terms of the training, training is available, but again, it's not like a mandatory training for the Uber drivers or Lyft drivers. So for this question, behavioral control, the answer could be yes and no. Then if we look at the next standard, financial control, whether or not Uber provide invest work-related material for those drivers. So to this question, the answer in this part probably is no. If we think about the Uber drivers, how they get their car, they're gonna need to pay for their vehicle. They're gonna pay for their insurance. They're gonna pay for basically all these different type of supply. Uber will not pay for anything for the ride, for the vehicle. And those drivers, they don't need to work exclusively for Uber drivers. And in fact, sometimes when I, for example, try to get an Uber ride at the airport, I talk to some of these drivers. They work for more than one platform during the week. For example, they can work as the Uber drivers Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, they can work as the Lyft driver. They have both the Lyft, that LED, the pink, that LED light put in the front of the windshield. They also have the windshield sticker for the Uber platform. So they don't have the exclusive clause that they have to work for one platform only. And they don't, of course, don't get a paid periodically by the Uber. They only get paid when they get the passenger to pay for their ride. And finally, for the relationship of the parties, you do need to sign some paperwork over the app, but in terms of the job, it's not a permanent job. So those drivers, they can decide anytime to join the platform, work as a driver, and maybe 2 weeks later, those people, they feel that I wanted to stop working for the platform. They can just go walk away anytime. So there is no permanent job position for those drivers. So if we look at all these three standards, our question is yes, no, no, and no. So in this case, it is probably in this case, based on the IRS standard, the Uber drivers cannot be identified or classified as the employers. So in this case, based on IRS standard, Uber drivers, Lyft drivers, they are classified as the independent contractors. And interestingly, if we look at the state level, we can find other different states, there are different type of rules to reclassify those Uber drivers. For example, let's say in the state of California, they use the test, it's called the ABC test, to determine whether or not those Uber Lyft drivers should be classified as independent contractors or the employees. So back to 2019, the state of California, they passed the Assembly Bill number 5, the AB5 law. So based on this law, it requires that those platforms such as Uber and Lyft, they should classify their drivers as the employees rather than the independent contractors. And interestingly, 1 year later, the state of California passed another proposition, the proposition number 22, to exclude those drivers from the employees. Just like the I put here, proposition number 22. For those people, for those drivers, for the app-based transportation and delivery services, they are reclassified as independent contractors, not the employees, unless they set the driver's hours. Here we are talking about those companies, say Uber and Lyft. They set driver's hours, or they require acceptance of the specific ride and the delivery request, or restrict the working for the other companies. In other words, if you say work as a Uber driver and you don't meet those standards, then you're going to be classified as independent contractors rather than the employees. So we can find that these different type of the state level regulation just keep changing all the time. This is just at the state of California, and currently other states, for example, New York State, Massachusetts, they're also trying to pass the new law to reclassify the gig workers, for example, the Uber drivers, Lyft drivers, as in one of these two categories. So that's about what is going on right now around the nation and also in some different states about how the state government try to reclassify those gig workers. Any questions before we move to the challenges to the gig workers' compensation?
Certainly, Dr. Song, I'd like to ask a question. Do you think other states would follow California's example?
So far, the Massachusetts and New York, they are trying to follow this the rule, like the AB5, the Assembly Bill number 5, but they also get some pushback. Some of the major reason is that a lot of these state, their customers, they complain that if those places, say Massachusetts and New York, they pass this the new law, this is going to raise the Uber fee as well as for their. So finally, the passengers will pay more. Yeah, that's a very good question. We're actually going to talk about a little bit more near the end of today's session about these new challenges. All right, so now let's move to the next section about the challenges to the gig workers' compensation. So in this part, I specifically focused on these three different elements. That includes the gig workers, their compensation outcomes, the process that determines or evaluate their compensation, as well as the communication related to their compensation related communication. So these are the three elements underneath the justice. So the first challenge is about the outcome. So when we look at the gig workers, what they receive, how much they receive for their work. Currently, the biggest challenge in this area is the gig workers. They are not really protected in the same way as those traditional workers. For example, let's say when it comes to the total rewards or employee compensation, we know that in the US, there are the FLSA, FMLA, as well as the WARM, these different laws to protect the traditional employees. For example, minimum wage. If they are non-exempt employees and they work more than 40 hours a week, they should get paid at least 1.5 times of the regular pay rate, something like that. They also should get the employee benefits, such as medical insurance or workers' compensation, the different type of those mandatory benefits. But when it comes to the gig workers, there's no law to protect these rights. Actually, some research articles like those one I shared on the right side of the slides indicate that the gig workers actually they are kind of just like this article here. They talk about those gig workers. They deliver the service virtually. They are like the slave to the keyboard. So basically, they spend a long time to work to get their tasks finished. But when it comes to the compensation, this is totally up to the requesters, their standard to give you the compensation. Just like one of the in this news article reported that there are some gig workers on the platform. They spend 3 days to finish the work, and then before they started, the requesters say, if you finish the work, you're gonna get, let's say, a decent compensation. Then 3 days later, they finish the work, and the requester just say, well, you know what? This part is problematic. That part is not quite right. They just try to find out different reasons to cut your compensation. And then finally, those workers only get 50 to 60% of what they were promised to get paid. Not to mention other type of the benefits. For example, let's say for the Social Security, that's another issue. If you join, say, work for a company, if you check your the pay stub every month or maybe every 2 weeks, you find that there is a part, it's called the Social Security tax. So usually if you work for what we call the traditional company, you get paid, you pay 50% of the, you're going to contribute about 7.8% of your income to the Social Security tax. But if you're an independent contractor, you need to pay the full amount. You pay 15.6% of your income. Why is that? Because the employer will not pay for you. You're going to pay the full amount by yourself. So these are also the challenges for the, so basically the gig workers, they need to have more out-of-pocket expenses, and at the same time, there's no protection to their income, say minimum wage or any kind of compensation agreement. And even if something happened, you try to file a complaint, this time gonna take a really, really long time. And because many of these works, the agreement were signed virtually. You even have no idea where those requesters they are located. So we're going to talk about this challenge shortly in the next few slides. So that's a part about the outcomes. So basically the gig workers, when it comes to their the outcome, they don't get the same level of fairness or part-time employees. And for the process, this is another issue. So process, this part refers to how the gig workers, their jobs, their performance is evaluated. So when we think about the performance evaluation, if you join the company, if you work for an organization, you will have either annual evaluation, and some companies, they even have the 6-month evaluation or 360-degree feedback, something like that. But if you work for a requester, there are going to be limited evaluation provided to you. And this is basically like the evaluation process, like a black box. You have no idea how your performance is going to be evaluated. And there's also going to be limited way to monitor your performance. Say if you work remotely, virtually for a requester, the requester will have limited information about how you complete your work. And also because of the limited transparency, when you have the evaluation, you have no idea how they reach the decision, how they reach the agreement that they're going to pay you this amount rather than the amount that they promised before. And also there's no standardized answer. Maybe this platform going to evaluate based on the kind of not evaluate based on how you complete your work, how free you stay message, how you're going to communicate with other stakeholders. So different platforms, they have different types of the standard when it comes to that. Evaluation process is also subject to requesters' discretion. If they say you have a good performance, you get a 100% of your compensation. If they say your performance is poor, your performance is problematic, then they're going to just pay you a reduced amount. And in that case, they're going to be you don't really have the cannot figure out what are the factors behind those decisions. So that's one of the article I recently read from the BBC talking about why the gig work is so hard to regulate, because different platforms, they just basically have their own rules about regulating, about managing their gig workers. And because there's no law to protect, to make this process standardized, so every platform can do just basically any kind of process they want. And finally, about communication. If we think about the gig workers, most of the gig workers, they get connected to the requesters virtually. They sign the contract or they sign the agreement virtually as well. So if something happened, you try to reach out to those the requesters. It's sometimes going to be very difficult, challenging to get connected. For example, for Lyft, if you check the Lyft, recently they added the phone number. You can call the 1-800 number to get connected. But previously, if you work as a Lyft driver, if you have any kind of issues, there is even no phone number you can reach to. The only thing you can do is to go to their website and choose what kind of issue you have and submit a ticket. And you're going to need to wait. And probably it's going to take about 2 days, 3 days, or even 5 days to get the result. And even some apps, they some websites, they post the articles about, hey, look, here are the 8 ways to contact the TaskRabbit customer service. Because usually we should have no barrier to connect to those the requesters. If we get any problem, we have any questions, we want to ask our supervisor, ask our colleagues, we can just make the phone call or send the message, or send an email. But in the gig work platforms, this process is going to be time consuming, going to be sometimes very complicated before we get a response. I mentioned if we get any kind of dispute, we wanted to appeal, we wanted to try to find the resolution. The process is going to be take for a really, really long time before we even hear anything from those platforms. So this is about the communication part. So these 3 parts basically indicate there are those 3 issues, just like we talked before. The distributive part, which is about the compensation scheme. The procedural part is about the evaluation method. And the interactional part is about the communication channels. If we have these 3 parts work together, this actually construct the 3 dimensions of what we call the organizational justice, which is a concept to describe whether or not the workers, they feel they are fairly treated in an organization. And in our context, this is about the platform, whether or not those gig workers, they feel they are fairly treated by either the requesters or maybe by the platforms. Depends on those 3 aspects we talked before: distributive justice, procedural justice, and interaction justice. So that's one of the research project I did recently to identify those 3 types of the justice issues. And so once we identify those 3 parts, 3 issues, the next question going to be, so what? So we identify the issue. So what are going to be the implications? So one of the implications is, if we think about the justice issues, those 3 issues, just like this figure I put here on the left side, we have these different type of the justice. Those type of the justice issues gonna make employees or the workers feel they are unfairly treated. And then finally, they're gonna leave, they're gonna turn over. So this is what we have in the traditional working context. But what makes gig economy or the gig workers different from the traditional context is that we have the right side, this part, the turnover, to be at these 3 levels, which can be escalated from the task turnover to requester turnover to finally the platform turnover. So, and this also is what I indicated in the research project. I mentioned that this makes the gig workers turnover to be unique, to be very different from other type of the turnover. Because for the gig workers, when they feel they are not really fairly treated by their requesters, they're going to start from the turnover of their tasks. So maybe I feel that this time, this task is not really fair. Maybe I just next time try some different task from the same requester. So this is what we call the task turnover. Then maybe after 1 month, this worker noted and realized that seems like it's not a problem about the task, but the problem with the requester, because the requester keep deducting my money, keep paying me less than what he or she promised. So I noted that this is the problem with the requester. So next time I'm gonna try a different requester. Maybe a few months later, I realized that because something wrong with the platform, everybody, all the requesters, they treat workers unfairly. So maybe now is the time I wanted to move to a new platform, something we call the platform turnover. And here we also want to keep in mind, there is a transaction cost for those workers. When they move from one task to another task from the same requester, this is a relatively lower cost because most things still gonna be the same. Then if we move from one requester to another, it might involve higher level of the cost because those workers gonna need to learn about different requesters. And finally, when the workers try to move from one platform to a new platform, this is gonna incur the highest level of the transaction cost. So basically, I needed to do the sign up again to sign up a new platform to add my maybe bank account number. Everything gonna be groundbreaking, start from the scratch. So this is gonna involve the highest level of the transaction costs. So when the gig workers, they think about the turnover, they're gonna start from the task turnover. If they find that the task turnover cannot solve the problem, they're gonna move to the next level and finally to the platform turnover. So that's something unique about the gig workers in terms of their turnover, which is different from the turnover in the traditional working context. Finally, in my today's presentation, I also wanted to share a little bit. I noticed that I might have another 3 minutes to complete this. Let me see the chat box. Okay. I think this is our the last section here about the future opportunities to address the compensation issues. So back to those 3 types of justice issues. When we design, try to design a better platform for the gig workers, we're gonna need to again try to address the issues from those 3 different aspects. So the first aspect is about the compensation, about the outcome. We wanted to make sure we compensate the gig workers to make that aligned with their contribution, their responsibilities they take, the commitment they put to their work, just like what Dr. Stacey Adams mentioned back to 1963 about the equity theory. We want to make sure there is a balance between workers' input and the output to make them feel they are fairly compensated based on their contribution to their work. That's one of the most basic consideration element we want to keep in mind. And we can also try to design, probably in the future, some organization, some platform might try to design multiple tiers of the workers. For example, one of the possible direction, this is also one direction I'm thinking about, is that platforms maybe can design these the so-called 2-tier system, 2 different levels of the flexibility and the responsibilities. For example, tier 1 going to be the tier that the workers going to take more responsibility and they have lower flexibility, and maybe they can just work for only one platform, some exclusive agreement, something like that. As a return, those workers will be classified as employees because they take more responsibility, they're more committed, they have lower level of flexibility, so they should get the compensation for that. So for those tier 1, they might want to be classified as the employees, whereas tier 2 are the workers. They take lower responsibility, they have higher flexibility. For example, maybe someone who just wanted to make extra money during the weekend, maybe just wanted to work, say, from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. on Saturday and Sunday. They want a higher level of the flexibility. So they can work, they can make the money, but they're going to receive less for their compensation. And they're going to be classified as independent contractor because they get a higher level of flexibility. They get more control about their work and their life. And one thing we also want to keep in mind, if the company decides to hire tier 1 and tier 2 at the same time, so basically they're trying to have the regular employees and the contractors work at the same time in the same location or maybe in the same area. So if that's the case, we also want to keep in mind to have those 2 groups of the workers to collaborate seamlessly. Just like some of these Academy of Management journal articles suggest that if we try to put the temporary workers or independent contractors work with the regular employees, so we want to make sure that to have them to build a cohesion and a collaboration to make sure the performance won't backfire. So that's also something we need to keep in mind if we have 2 groups of the workers to work at the same time. And finally, when it comes to the performance evaluation process, we want to make the process to be transparent. Maybe we can build a flow chart, something like this, to show this is how things flow from the beginning to the end, to show how their performance is going to be evaluated. We can also try to invite those workers to get involved in the evaluation process we call the participative management. And then finally, we're going to need to have, in terms of the communication, we can try to design a dashboard or personalize the messages to the gig workers so that they feel that they are treated with respect and consideration, and they also get the real-time communication from their requesters to know about what's going on, what about their performance at this moment, what about their anything that they can improve at this point. So these are the different type of the possible solutions to these issues. And finally, for the platforms, since we just talked about the workers, platforms will also need to do something to solve the issue, because when it comes to the gig work and the gig economy, we have the three-party relationship. We have the platform, we have the requesters, we have the workers. So the platform should take more responsibility to regulate those, not just the workers, but also the requesters. Say if the platform get a multiple complaint about a specific requester, maybe that is a red flag. The platform will need to investigate and find out what's going on. If this requester keep on cutting the payment to their workers, something like that. Because these days, when we think about the platform, they're no longer like what we had before 15 years ago, like a top coder and Kagos, just like a place we go to for fun, for challenging. We have currently these platforms for people to make a living. So we need to make the changes. We're gonna need to make sure the platforms is the place that all these gig workers, they get a fair compensation and a fair treatment from those requesters. And also we want to standardize the platform fees, because currently different platforms, they charge different either commission or maybe subscription fee or different type of the monthly fee. So it would be better to have a standardized fee schedule, or either in terms of the percentage or dollar amount will need to be implemented across different type of the platforms. So that's about what I wanted to share in my today's presentation. And the next two slides basically talk about the new challenges. For example, just like I mentioned before, some of these platforms, the workers and the customers, they complain that the new laws just make the customers to pay more for their services, and it actually hurts those gig workers. So those are what we call the roadblocks. And also for Uber also tried to do something to prevent from classifying those drivers as their employees. For example, Uber earlier 2020, they tried to allow the Uber drivers to set the fee by themselves, to give them this freedom. It sounds like a good plan, but in reality, what is really going on is that those platforms, when they do that, they can just tell the legislator, hey, we give our drivers this freedom to let them to set the price. So now you cannot ask me to reclassify them as employees, because if they are my employee, they should not have this freedom. So they try to give them the freedom and then say, well, they are not our employees. So these days we can find that all these different platforms, they try to do some different things to avoid classifying those workers as their employees, because from the compensation perspective, if you have the employees, you're going to pay more to the employees compared with the independent contractors. So that's about everything I wanted to share in the presentation, and I'm also happy to answer all the questions in our today's session. One question that David added here: due to the low employment rate, there being a decline in gig workers, and how are gig companies attract and retain the gig workers? Yes, that's a good question. So the low unemployment these days, it's really, if we think about what happened in the past 2 years, I remember back to 2021, 2022, we heard about the labor shortage, as well as the Great Resignation. So a lot of the professionals, they try to find a place that pay them more or give them the better benefits. And it's also in the past 2 years, it's get easier to land a job compared with the time like during the pandemic or maybe before the pandemic. So these days, when people try to join the what we call the traditional labor force as a full-time or part-time employees, those platforms, they do experience the labor shortage, because if we think about the number of the workers on the market, if they go to the gig work economy, if they go to those platforms, they're gonna have either less time or fewer people to join the regular labor force. So for those platforms, a lot of things they try to do. For example, they try to increase the compensation. So this is the one thing they try to do. And they also try to indicate that we're gonna pay as the minimum wage of the state. For example, in the past 2 years, Uber has collaborating with the New York City, the Yellow Cab, try to bring those Uber drivers to be part of the Yellow Cab, so that they can increase their compensation, so to encourage more people to join Uber at New York City. So that's one example I can think about. Other than that, also some platform, like I said, they try to increase the compensation. For example, there's a UK-based gig work platform. It's called Prolific. They already set the standard that when the requester pays those workers, they have to pay the UK minimum wage when they compensate their workers. So this is something that happened right now in UK. So probably in the future, some platforms in the US will implement the similar kind of rule. For example, at least align with the state level minimum wage in the future.
Thank you, Dr. Song. We have time for 1 or 2 more questions very quickly. If anyone has any questions to ask, Dr. Song was very informative, and I think we all learned a lot. And I appreciate your time, sir, and your preparation to doing this for us.
My pleasure.
Okay, Mary has a question here, Dr. Song.
The gig
chat.
workers. So the gig workers, the new bill is also in this case, it's similar to what we just talked about, those 3 aspects of the justice, about the distributive justice, about the procedural justice, as well as the interactional justice. So those are the 3 aspects that the new bill try to protect. And like I said, I think in this case, because these days, the labor shortage, we talk about the labor shortage in the past 2 years for many times. And this year, the labor shortage issue is a little bit alleviated. But these days, we still see the labor shortage. We no longer call that labor shortage, but a structural labor shortage. That means some industries these days, they get the labor shortage is not quite a big issue. But in other industries, the labor shortage is still an issue. For example, healthcare is a big issue. And interestingly, I read an article from Wall Street Journal about 2 weeks ago, talking about these days, the healthcare industry try to add the gig work model, not in Florida, but other places. So basically, the idea is that those hospitals, they're gonna try to hire the nurses instead of having the very expensive travel nurses. They try to add the gig work model into the hospital. So they try to find out if those nurses, they have for example, time available, say in the next 2 months, they can sign up and work for that hospital, maybe at another city for a short term. And after that, they're gonna get back to the hospital. They have their primary job. So we find that these days, yes, those the new bill, like you mentioned about at Florida and also other places, they try to add the gig work or the gig model into their business.
Thank you, Dr. Song. Bahaudin has a question.
Yeah, certainly. First of all, thank you very much for the excellent presentation and the latest research that you shared with all of us. Thank you so much for that. Second, my question is, during your research, have you run into any articles or discussion on whether the gig workers will be organizing into unions and whether that's a possibility for them or not?
Yes, that's a good question too. For the gig workers, so far, gig workers has not organized any type of the union in the US. But if we look at other industries, for example, Apple has some of their stores unionized, as well as Amazon. Amazon, they have their 2 years ago, in the past 2 years, they have one location in Alabama, Bessemer, Alabama, unionized, and also the Starbucks. So those employees, when we think about those employees, they work there, especially like Amazon. They have a very high turnover rate. Some of the employees actually in Alabama, their unionization vote process, they had a really, really hard time. The first round of the vote, they did not pass the threshold. So about a few months later, they did another round of the vote. So finally, they get the second round, they get that passed. So why was that? Because many of those workers, they work during the first time of the vote, they voted, and then the company, the union, the representative, they cannot find those people again because those people just left. So if we think about Amazon, if they have their warehouse workers, they work on those kind of short-term basis, they work for a few months and then they leave, they actually work in a pretty similar type of the arrangement like the gig workers. And actually a lot of, again, for example, Amazon, during the holiday season, they hire lots of the warehouse workers as the gig workers just for the holiday season. So in the future, probably Amazon might be the place that we see the gig workers start building the union. But one of the challenges that gig workers, like we talked before in today's presentation, two essential components include they're on demand, they are temporary based. So once they have the vote, once they have the union established, some of these workers, they leave. Then how they gonna keep the union? This is gonna be the issue. So in the future, we might see those warehouse workers, they work on the temporarily based. They might not have the same title as the gig workers, but their working arrangement is gonna be pretty similar to the gig workers. So my prediction maybe is that in the future, we might see the gig workers, they might want to try to build the union. But one prerequisite might be that before the vote, before they build the union, those workers need to be converted into at least temporary workers before they can vote, before they can build the union.
Thank you, Dr.
Dr.
Song.
Song, thank you so very much again. We need to close it, and we appreciate your taking the time. I think we've all learned a lot, and I think we've all benefited from your knowledge, sir. So thank you for sharing that with us. I'd like to say thank you again to those who joined. Want to wish you well, Dr. Song, and thank you again, sir, for your participation with us this afternoon.
Thank you
all.
so much.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.